Hello there, my name is Mike. This is going to be my second video offering some feedback on Soulframe, Prelude 12. In my first video, I talked about some of the melee systems that really weren't working for me and generally my feelings about them. In this video, I want to go a little bit deeper into one of the specific topics I mentioned there, which is the parry and block systems not feeling great to play with. Before I get started, I wanted to acknowledge that I am not the best player ever, and a lot of my issues that I had going into this were actually a skill issue that I discovered once I got into the recordings and started watching my gameplay back. With that said, what remains in the video I feel are mechanical issues and issues that the developers need to fix to improve the gameplay and make it a little bit more fluid. I'm going to lead off talking about animations. I feel that they're the biggest problem with the current parry and block system, and that's for both the enemy and the player character's animations. I've also installed an add-on for OBS that shows my inputs on the screen so that you can kind of follow along and see exactly what I'm pressing as things are going on the screen. I've also slowed down a lot of the footage so you can see frame by frame where damage is going out, where animations start and end, and such like that. First, we'll talk about the character animations, and really it boils down to there being no good visualization that a block or parry has started, because the animation on screen of the character is completely unreliable, and enemies will hit through it quite frequently, so it shows that that is not actually registering that you are blocking. It also works in the opposite direction, where frequently you will hit your block button and it will perform a parry or a block, even though the character never does the blocking animation and you are still in the middle of an attack or movement. I've been told that this sometimes has to do with some actions canceling out a block, even though it doesn't cancel out the animation itself. And same way the other way, some actions will cancel out the animation, but it won't actually cancel out the mechanic of the block or parry. I've spent a lot of time messing around with the parry and blocking, trying to figure out what actions cause what reactions, and I'm not finding a whole lot of consistency, which just kind of makes the system feel really buggy and off. And that dovetails into the enemy animations and the parry windows. When I talk about the parry window, it's specifically referring to the point in an enemy's animation where you need to hit your block button to get that perfect parry to allow for the riposte. Some attacks are definitely better than others, and some are particularly egregious, but generally the parry window for attacks seems very inconsistent and on an attack by attack basis, which kind of forces you to learn every single individual attack and keep getting hit by it until you figure out exactly when in that animation you need to be parrying, rather than parrying a few frames before damage like you would in many other games. Watching a lot of my recordings back, I found that I was attempting my parry 3-4 frames before damage actually went out, which in other games that I've played with parry mechanics, this is typically where you're aiming for your parry, that you want the enemy's weapon to nearly be making contact with your character when you press the button. But there are plenty of attacks in Soulframe where the enemy will be mid-swing with the weapon almost by their side when you are expected to press the parry button, while there are other attacks where you have to wait until the very last second to press your block button. This just makes the melee combat feel extremely inconsistent, and I think that's my biggest gripe with it. I can't be sure that I'm actually going to hit a parry, and there are plenty of times when I'm standing there waiting for a parry to come in so that I can deal some big damage, and I feel like I've absolutely hit the button at the correct time, and I still get slapped through it and killed. Recording for this video has actually been a huge help. I've been able to go back and check what I feel are bullshit deaths and bullshit hits to confirm that I did hit the parry button in what should have been a reasonable amount of time to get a parry in. I think that about wraps up my observations of the mechanical implementation of the parry and block systems for the game. Everything from here on out is going to be more subjective and how I feel playing the game and dealing with the enemies and the gameplay. I think I'll start off the subjective part of the video talking about the parry window itself and how restrictive it feels for most of your melee weapons. You have a very small window of reaction time for a lot of the unblockable attacks coming in that are almost instantaneous. I know I personally end up hammering the parry button every time an enemy starts to make an attack, just in case it's one of the quick attacks. since there's not a whole lot of visual difference between the startup to a quick attack that you can tell before that quick attack actually goes out and does damage, versus when the rest of the animation actually starts to play for a longer wind-up animation attack. I think a blanket 30 to 50% increase to the parry window for all weapons would probably do the game a whole lot of good and make the parry feel a lot more consistent, even with the janky animations. I think the long blade with the bonus parry window in its skill tree, as well as the squirrel totem that increases your parry window, actually feels pretty decent. So I wouldn't mind seeing that percentage go out to all weapons, and then have the long blade still specialize in it to keep that weapon's fantasy as the parry weapon alive, and reach like 60-70% parry bonus. Next is another issue that I kind of touched on in my other video, talking about enemies piling you and not really giving you a whole lot of options besides kite out and then poke at them as they run after you. This ties into the topic of the parry and block system, just because when you get into a crowd of enemies and you hit a good parry, you are not able to capitalize on the riposte and deal big damage to that enemy for fear of another enemy or 2 or 3 coming up next to you and smacking the daylights out of you while you're locked in that animation. I think that we need some invincibility frames during that riposte animation, and maybe shorten up the riposte animation just a little bit. That way you can really be aggressive and get into a group of enemies and offer a little bit of reward for playing a more up close and personal playstyle rather than kiting out with a bow or a magic weapon. On the topic of offering a reward for playing the riskier melee playstyle, I think that hit combos could add a lot of flavor and a lot of depth to the melee combat in the game and really encourage players to get into a group of enemies and get good at parrying, get good at chaining their attacks, and avoiding damage while in a large group. Obviously right now, dodging and poking and kiting is the preferred playstyle. It's safer, and you will definitely have more success than if you just go into a group of enemies and start trying to hit them. I hope that that changes in the future and they can really fine-tune the melee in the game so that it's a really enjoyable way to play, and it offers a lot of reward for the risk that you're taking by getting up close and personal the way you have to. And finally, I have just one more gripe before we get out of here, and that's to do with the enemies shooting arrows at you constantly. When you block or parry an incoming arrow, it will stop you in your tracks and kill all of your momentum. You have to start running again. So it makes it difficult to close the gap between yourself and a ranger if you're trying to block the arrows that are incoming, rather than trying to dodge their aimbot. This just adds to the oppression that you feel from having a ranged enemy or 2 firing down on you the entire time you're trying to fight. Along with their high fire rate, this makes it very difficult to close the gap on a ranged enemy, especially when you have a group of melee enemies on your back the entire time. So every time you block one of the incoming arrows, you give all those melee enemies a moment to catch up to you and start their attacks to hit you again. Realistically, this isn't even close to the biggest issue that I've covered in this video. It's just one of those frustrations that I have, and I figured I'd throw it out there in case other people are feeling the same way about it. But yeah, I think that's about everything that I wanted to cover in this video. I had a couple comments on my last video that my audio was low. I tried to bump it up a little bit. I'm not sure if that worked out. I also had a couple complaints that I didn't use very good music, so I tried to find a more generic kind of chill track to put in behind this, so you're not just listening to the annoying sound of my voice. Any and all feedback is greatly appreciated. I want these to be the best they can be for the limited experience that I have in making videos. So thank you to everybody that commented and gave me a little bit of advice on how to remedy it and make these more enjoyable going forward. I'd really like to make more of these videos, and the reception seemed to be really good for the first one. I really like the conversations that started over on the feedback forums. Obviously, I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks about the issues that I raised here. If there's anything that I missed, please tell me, either here on YouTube or over in the feedback forums, where I'll be posting this video just like I did with the first one. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.